Hey, you guys, Ras out here in Singapore, and thank you so much for joining me on the Night Owl podcast. Now, whether you've been with me for a while or if you're brand new to the channel, I welcome you. I'm so glad you found me, and I'm hoping that while you have a chance to listen a little while, that you find something that's, I don't know, provocative in the fact that it actually makes you think of things you haven't thought of before and maybe expands your mind a little bit. So here I am sharing my perspective. And it could come from pretty much anywhere. I am constantly inspired throughout the course of my day, and it could be anything as simple as a post on Instagram or Facebook, obviously. It could be anything from radio, podcasts, new music, lyrics I'm trying to write, dialogue from TV that I'm watching. It could be anything. I'm serious. So basically what ends up happening is life kind of inspires me, and I kind of inspire my art, and content is created. That's basically what happens. So lately I've been talking about the human needs and how sometimes when something is missing, you have a specific type of behavior that kind of emerges from that need that they're trying to meet. We already covered a little bit about what it looks like when someone is trying to meet the need of significance. They want to become, important in their lives, and so they have certain behaviors that they exhibit that they have learned throughout the course of their life that if they do this, they get what they want, and so they continue exhibiting that behavior. But this time I want to touch a different human need. I want to talk a little bit about the need for human connection. Now, a lot of times when you see people who have this as the most prioritized need in their life, it comes from a place of they were always threatened with being disconnected from people if they did not do what they were told, if they did not behave a certain way. So they do their very best to always please the people around them. And eventually it looks like people pleasing, like I mentioned, but it also can look like being a doormat and not being able to stand up for yourself, just to roll over and say yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full sir to anybody that would ask. And it seems like these people have no spine whatsoever. They don't have a backbone. They're not able to to stand up. They don't have any self-respect. There are a lot of labels that people throw out, but people don't tend to dig any deeper to find out why they behave that way. And it's mostly because this is the way they grew up. This is what they've learned along the way, is the type of behavior they have to exhibit in order for them to be loved, because that was a point of contention as they were growing up, let's say. So for example, I'm going to offer myself up as tribute today. Honestly, I am a people pleaser. I've been a people pleaser most of my life, and honestly, my go-to belief was the fact that, what, y'all think that you can't please people all the time, all of the people all the time, but I bet you I can, because I know that if I don't put myself on the list, I can get everybody's needs met. But that's not the way you want to live, right? Eventually that's going to run out, and that's exactly what happened to me. I ran out of steam. I was so stretched in 5,000 different directions that I wasn't able to serve any one person very well, because I was saying yes to everybody. I didn't know how to say no. And most of that comes down to the fact that no one had ever showed me what that would look like if I said no and it was accepted. People only show me what happens when I say no, and like a big fight breaks out, because how dare I say no? How come I can be disrespectful? I can be rude like this. Who am I to say no? You should just do as you're told, that kind of thing. So I had a tough time of it, y'all. I really did. And because I shuffled around so much as a young child, I was desperate for love and affection and a sense of belonging, and that's what I needed. And so I did everything I could to fit in. So just a little bit of background. I moved around a lot, like I said. So I moved from the time I was 5 years old up until I was 14. And that spans across 5 different countries, 10 different schools, 7 different languages until I hit the age of 14, like I said. And so that was a lot of fitting in that I really wanted to do. I just wanted to have my group of people. I wanted to have a set of people that I could call my own, that actually would accept me, that loved me for who I was. And I just could not find that anywhere. Why? Because we constantly were moving, honestly. So within my own family dynamic, I was the oldest child. I had 2 younger brothers. But even then, I did not have that really tight mother-daughter bond, or father-daughter bond for that matter. So I was constantly trying to find someone that I could look up to, that I could belong to, that, accepted me, wanted me around. It was always a conditional sort of arrangement. It was like, if I behaved myself, right, and I remembered everything that you told me about how you needed me to behave, your set of rules, your way of doing things, if I could do it that way, then I was fine. But guess what? I'm not you. I will never be you. So when I would make silly mistakes, I would lie to cover it up. I would do anything I could, underhanded or otherwise, to make sure that you were on good standing with me, because I just wanted you to love me, right? I just wanted you to love me. And since it was conditional, I learned that certain behaviors were acceptable and certain behaviors weren't. I learned to lie, y'all. lie my ass off. Why? Because it was reinforced. I think we talked about this with rewards and punishments in another episode, but let's talk about that for a second. I lied because most of the time I got away with the lie. Once in a while I got in trouble, and so I was extra careful about the lie the next time. I learned to lie very well in that regard. So every time I made a mistake, I adjusted it so that the next time I wouldn't make a mistake until I was caught again. But it was a bad habit. Why? Because I was denying who I was. I was not owning up to the things I was doing because I needed you to love me more than I needed to love myself. And that was a problem. So that kind of manifested everywhere. It manifested in all of my relationships. It manifested in all of my friendships. I grew to a point where I depended on the fact that I knew at some point I was going to leave these people behind and move somewhere else. So I didn't bother. I didn't bother making friends or making amends. I didn't know what the other side of having an argument or having conflict actually resolved looked like. If I fucked up, I was depending on the fact that I was going to move at some point. I didn't have to see your face ever again. Well, now thanks to social media, I can't do that very well, can I? People fall off, obviously. We grow in different directions, but now I actually have to face my consequences. I have to face what happens when my actions don't turn out so well, or you catch me in the act of lying. And that was, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years ago now, because since then I've learned to stand up for myself. Now, when you tell somebody they have no self-respect, why would they bow down and do whatever everyone else is asking them to? It is kind of a slap in the face. And it is kind of derogatory because most people see that as a sign of weakness, and an insecurity, a lack that you have that makes you less of a human being. So the ideal human being someone that has self-confidence, that has self-respect for themselves, that can draw boundaries, that can say no, that feels good about themselves no matter what they're wearing. But that's not all of us, is it? Every one of us has some kind of an insecurity, and a lot of times we don't want to cop to the insecurity because that means admitting that we are less than 100%. Not realizing that we are 100% as we are because we've learned to be this way for a reason. It was a way that we learned to cope with the kind of environment we grew up in. So if needing that human connection is one of your number one needs, tendency is that you will do everything you can, including throw your own values down by the riverside in order to fill that need. This is why we end up in codependent relationships. This is why we say, okay, we love you, we'll do anything for you in toxic relationships. I've heard people say, you know what, it takes strength to leave a relationship that is toxic. Well, guess what? It takes strength to stay there too. It takes strength knowing full well that at some point that person's going to flip out and tear your head off for you to stay there anyway. Most people, right? Flight or oh. See, I'm so riled up. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. Fight or flight, right? Most people will have self-respect and fight back. And then other people would rather run away from the entire situation and not have to deal with it again. But then also there is a third set of people who will freeze and just go along to get along because they don't want to start any commotion. They don't want to leave because that will also start commotion. They don't want to say anything because that will start commotion. They just want peace. They just want to be where they are. They want to not ruffle as many feathers as possible and just go along with the flow, which means it takes a different kind of strength to stay where you are and allow things that you know are wrong, that don't fit you, that don't feel good to continue happening because you are afraid. And people are afraid to admit or, embarrassed to admit that they're afraid. But there's nothing wrong with that. This is something you've been taught is the best way for you to handle it until you learn better and then you do better. So again, I've been kind of talking a lot about people pleasing and codependency and what it looks like to, just kind of go along as much as possible because you need that human connection. You want to be loved. Let's talk about this in the dating scene, shall we? A lot of times when we go out dating people, the ideal is to date as many people as possible and find the best of the people that you've dated that might be suitable for a long-term relationship. But what do? We date once, and on that first date, we try not to touch anything that's major points because we want the second date. So whatever we can do to secure that second date, isn't that also people pleasing? Isn't that also the need for human connection? And so once you get the second date, okay, now we've had 2 successful dates. I'd like a third one, please. And I will do anything I can not to ruffle any feathers, not to ask any crazy questions. And even if there are red flags, I may smooth them over or try to paint them a different color because I want to be successful. Because we have it in our heads somewhere that if the third date, it doesn't work out, there might be something wrong with me. So what do we do instead? I'm going to make sure I fit into your idea of what the perfect mate might be. So the first couple of dates, you might tell me about what all your exes did and how terrible that was. And I'm over here checking off, nope, I'm not like that. Nope, I'm not like that. Yep, I could definitely do this. I could make this work. And eventually, what I'm trying to do is make sure that I check off all of your items that you have on your checklist for the ideal partner. Because if I don't, I have it in my head that I'm less of a person, that I'm not good enough. Not that I'm not a good fit for you, but that I'm not good enough. And then suddenly, I'm not whole. I have this need to fill this gap somehow to make sure that you see me as a potential candidate for a future spouse, even though we might not be a good fit. So you can't tell me that somewhere in there that you don't have some kind of a people-pleasing habit inside of you. You can't tell me that out of all of these 6 human needs, that all of them don't have some kind of significance. Whether one is a number 1 priority versus a number 6 priority, they're all priorities. You need all of them. And in certain environments, when you have 4 out of 6 working, the other 2 that are lacking suddenly come to the forefront. They become the priority because you already have those needs met. You don't need to focus on the other 4. Does that make sense? So as I go through this list with different episodes, I want to give you an idea of just how much we have these needs in all of us. And it's not only people who are damaged, because let's face it, all of us have some damage. And it's not only people who are diagnosed with a mental health illness that go through these difficulties. We, everyday people who go through stress, who go through being exhausted over what we have to fulfill throughout the course of a day, who have difficulty communicating with some people because they're also difficult. All of us have mental health difficulties. Not to say that they're so crippling that we can't function, but we have them on an ongoing basis. They become chronic problems instead, and chronic problems are just as debilitating over the course of time. So bear with me as I go through some of these, everyday kind of symptoms to see that all of us need to make sure that we're meeting our needs effectively in a constructive way so that they actually build all of us up rather than become destructive somehow along the way. So if you have any questions or comments, please, as always, drop them in the comments below. Message me if you'd like. I would love to have a conversation with you. But in the meantime, I'm hoping this gave you something to consider because, let's face it, most of the time, our behavior is based on how we fulfill our human needs. And all of us have human needs. I'll catch you on the next one, you guys. Love you. Bye.